Welcome to Brew with Miss Baritone. I'm your host, Chicky Baritone, and this is my podcast. I'm gonna give it to you all black, no creamer, no sugar, no honey. So join me as I brew up some life-giving conversations with some dope people. Hello, and welcome to Brew with Miss Baritone. I am very excited about my next guest. Very excited. This is my cousin. This is family, Des Corley. And Des is a licensed funeral director and embalmer for the state of South Carolina and Alabama. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here.
Yes.
Thank you for the invite. It's definitely a blessing to be in your presence.
Oh, well, all right. Mm-hmm. So we play a lot. However,
absolutely,
I had to have you on, cousin, because there is so many things about what you have done over the years that I have admired. First of all, being in a funeral business in your early 20s is pretty phenomenal. Right. And not only that, you have 20 years in the game from starting out. And what did you do starting out when you graduated from Gupton Jones, which is in Decatur, Georgia?
Correct.
So that's your tie to Georgia. So once you graduated out of the funeral college, what was your first job into the business?
Yeah, well, actually, we're just going to back up just a tad.
Okay.
We kind of started this in the teens.
No way.
Yeah, so actually, I started my 10th grade year of high school in a shadowing program at Lower Richland High School.
Wow.
Home of the Diamonds.
Lower Richland, LR. For y'all don't know, Hopkins, South Carolina.
Yeah, and so of course one of my teachers and mentors, Miss Shirley Seabrooks and Miss Brenda Williams, they scheduled a field trip, 10th grade year high school, to the funeral home.
Wow.
And so from there I started skipping school and going to the funeral home to hang out, and then to kind of roll from there. So of course upon graduation in 1997 from Lower Richland, I enrolled into Gupton Jones in September of 97 and graduated from Gupton Jones in 99, in February 99.
Okay.
So then of course from there, I went back to the same funeral home that I started at in Columbia. And of course, my career has been blossoming since then.
Wow. Yeah. So I did not know that. So this goes further
27 years.
So what intrigued you? Was it the field trip that intrigued you about going into the business, or what was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to help people.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to recreate people. I didn't, as a young kid going to funerals, I didn't like to see people dead. I wanted to see people lifelike. And I figured I could have that talent to produce that. And here I am, 27 years later, still producing.
Dang.
Yeah.
And cousin, there's a lot more to the funeral business than just insurance, getting a plot, picking out a casket. Like, what are some of the first things people need to consider that they normally don't consider when someone dies, from the time they die to the time they're either in the ground or cremated? What's some of the things we need to be thinking about?
Some things you need to be thinking about is the person's identity, protecting their identity. Identity theft is on the rise, at its all-time high. And people are using deceased people's information to, of course, for their own growth. And so definitely protect your loved one's identity. Also making sure that affairs are in order, banking accounts, life insurance. Some people have it, some people don't. So therefore, that's really a non-factor at this day and time. But definitely got to make sure that estate affairs are in order for family matters futuristically.
So we just came out of, we're still in, but it had, a pandemic. And Lord knows all of the deaths, unfortunately, that we have experienced with people dying during the pandemic. But how has COVID, I recall you having a conversation about COVID in the body, but not just COVID, like how certain diseases are detected in the body. And, because your experience extends beyond just insurance and picking out caskets.
Correct.
So how did COVID affect how people were buried and just funeral services altogether?
Yeah, in the start of the pandemic, basically there was a limit of 10 people per service. And so, obviously a lot of the churches was on lockdown. There was government mandate, state and national. And, for loved ones that had lost a mother in a family where there were 10 children, obviously spouses couldn't come, another spouse couldn't come to the deceased. So they had to make a decision on which 10 people could come to the service. So that was very emotionally and mentally draining for the family on top of already dealing with the death. So obviously as we came in further to the pandemic, basically at that point, they increased the numbers to 50. And then, we kind of opened up a little bit. And then, of course, we went back kind of on a semi-lockdown because the numbers started rising again. So it was definitely more taxing than anything with people trying to grieve but having stipulations on how they're going to bury their loved one.
Yeah.
A lot of people were forced to cremate because they really didn't know how this virus was reacting. And so a lot of families did cremate their loved ones, not only because they were forced to, but also because they just didn't have resources. COVID caught a lot of families off guard, of not properly planning. And so therefore it led to a more dramatic situation than anything. But obviously as the pandemic that we're in now, further down the line, FEMA finally came up with, some funds to reimburse families for expenses they paid in. But however, that did come with some stipulations. So of course everybody's not getting reimbursed those funds.
Really?
So yeah, everybody's not entitled to.
What's some of the stipulations that you can recall?
Stipulations if a person had a prearranged funeral. So say if they went to the funeral and prearranged their funeral 20 years ago, they're not entitled to it.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Some families that had life insurance, they're not entitled to it. It's really meant to help the indigent families that, of course, had to come up with the money and they're getting reimbursed from it because they didn't have any insurance at all.
Yeah. So, Des, you know this better than anybody else. Why do you think people don't take their death seriously as it relates to preparing for it? We spend a lot of time preparing for living a certain kind of life. But when it comes to death, people utilize GoFundMes to furnish funerals. Cash App.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that because, I tell families all the time, we go out here, you get engaged, you plan 6 months to a year to get married, you spend $40,000 or $50,000 plus to get married.
Yep.
But we can't take the time out to spend $20 a month on a $100,000 policy. So many families, they put it off. And they say, well, I always got next month. I always got the next month after that. And then what happens is the person now becomes ill.
Yeah.
Well, now the insurance companies are reluctant to insure that person. Yep. And if they do insure you, now your premium went from $20 to $80, $90, $100 a month. And for the average person that is probably sick at this point, they probably don't have a job, they're probably on disability, so therefore they're on a fixed income. And being on the fixed income, now you got a $100 premium that you're trying to pay for insurance. That leaves you $600 a month to work with on a monthly budget. The other caveat to that is now you've realized that you're ill and you're going out and getting insurance. The insurance company has approved you to be one of their clients. Your premium's $100 a month. Well, now with any insurance company, you have to live 2 years.
Wow.
For that insurance to kick in.
Okay.
And if you, of course, die within that 2 year period, the only thing that's getting paid for out of that policy is what you put into it. So if you paid $100 a month for 18 months and you die in the 18th month, your family's only going to get $1,800 back. Whereas your face amount of the policy was probably $100,000.
Dang.
So many people, they don't realize that they think because they jump into an insurance policy that that's going to cover them. In essence, it does cover them. It is active coverage. But if you die from a natural cause illness, what happens at that point is they're going to review it and see, okay, did you get this insurance because you had a diagnosis in March and you went and applied for insurance in April? Or did you get this insurance in January and you got the diagnosis in March? Then at that point, you died 18 months later. Then you're technically covered because you got the insurance before the diagnosis came about. The only other way that the loophole in those policies, if it's less than 2 years old, if you die from a car accident, that was no fault of yours.
Okay.
Or you die from any type of homicide, that's no fault of yours or a family member.
Wow. That is good information. I didn't know that. And another misconception people have is I work full time. My insurance that I get under my company is enough. What do you say to that?
What I say to that is your good job that you got, get the coverage that the company offers you.
Sure.
But you need to come to the side and get a private policy, because today, tomorrow, the company either lets you go,
Yes.
lay you off,
Yep.
or you decide to leave on your own. Your coverage is now gone.
Yes.
So now you're out here back in the world with no insurance.
Right.
So therefore you go into another job. Some jobs may put you into a grace period to where you have to be at least employed for 30 days or 90 days, and then you're entitled to their full coverage. But what happens in that grace period if something happens to you?
That's right.
So I tell people all the time, make sure you get a policy that is a private policy, but also make sure it is a whole life policy. So therefore it covers you until you pass away. Obviously, you get a term policy. Term policy is going to cut off at some point based on the stipulations of that company. And the term policy, once it cuts off, there's nothing you get out of it. You don't get any type of maturity premiums back. You get nothing out of it, But it's insurance.
Right.
We pay car insurance. We pay homeowners insurance. You may never have a fire. You may never have a flood, but you have that coverage to protect you.
Right. So insurance as a whole is a very overwhelming subject in itself. What kind of advice would you give to people on what kind of insurance they should be looking for?
It really depends on your lifestyle. And I say lifestyle, if you're in the fast and furious lifestyle, you probably need some term insurance, something that's going to cover you ASAP, and it's cheap and you get it at a young age and everything. But I think that if you are definitely living a good life, long life longevity and everything, and you have a good family history of long life longevity, I do think that you need to get a good whole life policy. The only downfall to the whole life policy, as you get older, those premiums are going to creep up.
Okay.
And, I had a client recently that they had insurance with State Farm. There's no secret. State Farm is a good insurance company. But they do not only homeowners auto, but they do life insurance as well. They do annuities. And they were paying for about a $250,000 policy, husband, and of course the wife had a $250,000 policy. They're paying about $200 a month for premiums. Okay. They recently just turned into another age bracket. And so most of your age brackets move in 5-year increments. So they both went in, they left the 65 age bracket and now they're just turning 70. Well, at that point, State Farm, to protect their company, they wanted to do a review on them. The review consisted of a nurse coming out to their home, doing lab work, and also blood pressure, and of course temperature check, to of course keep them enrolled in the policy.
Gotcha.
$200 policy, something that on that particular day was going on with the husband, and his blood pressure was elevated. Nurse never said anything. All she's doing is documented for State Farm. So they got a letter literally 2 weeks later and told the husband that his premiums were now increasing from $200 a month to $750 a month for a $250,000 policy.
And this was because of an elevated blood pressure.
Blood pressure.
So what is that range? Do you know?
They don't disclose that to you.
You are kidding me.
They don't disclose that to you. Yeah. Blood pressure, medications, anything of that sort dealing with the body, they have a guide that they have to go by, but they can't disclose that to you for fear that you may try to alter that prior to them showing up to your house.
Wow.
So at that point, because he is retired, his wife is retired and everything, they had to make some tough decisions, and in their mind, they wanted to leave that $250,000 for her if she survived, or for the kids, but they cannot continue to live spending that kind of money
Yeah.
every month. So they asked me for my advice. I gave them, my logical advice. I said, you probably just need to scale that down, probably about $75,000. You have money for your funeral. You have money if your widow needs to be taken care of and everything. You don't have any bills, and so therefore, life insurance is not a lottery. I have to be very clear about that all the time. People think, oh, I got life insurance and I'm getting a check. It's not a lottery. You can only spend it one time. And when it goes, it goes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's a good point to make. So I know we kind of think of death and services, most people, either in the ground or cremated. Are there other options of being buried that people really don't consider?
Right. There are other options. Of course, mausoleums are really nice. Mausoleums, at one point in time, a lot of people looked at it as that was for the upper echelon community.
And explain what it is.
Mausoleum is above ground burial.
Okay.
Of course, is a wall that's constructed. The casket slides into that wall. There's a front that's put on that wall, and of course the name and everything is engraved on there, and that's where you are for eternity. No, you can't pull your loved one out to look at them. Once they sealed in there, they're sealed. That's the biggest misconception. People say, "Oh, we can go see Mama anytime we want to." No, you can't do that. Once Mama's in there, we're gonna seal it up and put a name on it, and everybody moves on by their life. But of course, the good part about the mausoleum is, if it rains, there's no water going in the casket. There's no bugs going in the casket. There's no mud going in the casket. No tractors are rolling over your grave. The storm comes through. You're not getting uprooted. So there's really great benefits to that. Also, you mentioned cremation. Cremation is on the rise. Traditional burials where the casket goes into the ground. You do have families that are doing burial at sea.
Burial where?
At sea.
At sea?
At sea. You can't be buried at sea. You get permission from the Coast Guard, and they take you out to sea. They drill holes in the casket, and they let you submerge into the ocean.
You're kidding me, right?
That is a big thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are really good options. You have a lot of families doing scattering at sea as well with cremains.
Okay.
The logistic of that is they have to take you out typically about 2 nautical miles. Just for precautionary reasons, people say, well, I'm going to take my loved one to the beach and scatter them on the beach. That's a risk you take, because if you get caught, that is a federal crime.
Did not know that.
That is a federal
Y'all
crime.
don't be out at the beach.
Scattering your loved ones.
Scattering your loved ones.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yeah. So there's definitely, so many options now. You have people that's being converted over, once they're cremated, converted into diamonds.
Come again?
Yeah, cremains. Your ashes can be converted into diamonds. Real diamonds.
Real diamonds?
Real diamonds.
I did not know that.
Big diamonds.
What?
Loaded carats. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. So there are options.
There are a lot of options,
and then, of
obviously.
course, you have, for those conservative people that want natural, you have green burials. Where they pretty much take you down the terrain in the forest, and there's no embalming, there's no casket, there's a wicker basket, and basically wrapped into a shroud, placed in that wicker basket. They dig a hole down in the forest and bury you in there and give you a stone marker. Everything's all natural.
So are there certain places where you can do this? I mean, I'm sure there's...
Every state has their own, designated areas.
Oh my God, you were like schooling me on stuff that I had no idea.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Whew. So the price tags are evidently different.
Yes. Yeah.
Across the board, depending on how you want to bury your loved one or cremate.
Or celebrate the life.
So what are some of the things that people need to consider when they are trying to decide on what funeral home to go to? I know all funeral homes are not all created equal. And I know there are some components of funeral homes that are similar in nature.
Right. I tell people all the time to do your research. Referrals are great. You've been to services before, go to Google, go to Yelp. Of course, just like anything else, even during reviews or reading reviews, you have to kind of just read between the lines on a lot of them.
Yeah.
Then, of course, most of all, check your budget. You know, a lot of families, in their mind, they have a $3,000 budget for a funeral these days.
How much, cousin?
$3,000. You can't get a funeral for $3,000 this day and time. You know, if you got somebody that's willing to do a funeral for $3,000, you better be very cautious on what they're willing to offer. So do your research. You know, this is any major milestone in your life. Death is a major milestone.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how you want to look at it. It's a sad situation, but you want to definitely do your research to see, okay, what funeral home I want to use. What exactly are you anticipating? I tell a lot of my clients, you have to be realistic. You know, you say, well, I want to spend $10,000. But realistically, let's talk about what you want to get within that $10,000.
Yes.
Of course, we all see the commercial on the Social Security commercial. The average funeral is $7,500.
We do.
They have told you correct. The average funeral is $7,500, but they never mention anything about a cemetery, because the cemetery is not a part of the funeral.
Good point.
So now you got $7,500 on this side, and you got another $12,000 on this side.
Wow.
You merge the two together, you got about $18,000 that you're spending for one situation of burial. So Social Security Administration, they are correct, but they never tell you about cemetery. Because you can't have a funeral without a cemetery.
God, that is so good. Mm-hmm. It's stuff we just don't normally think about.
Correct.
And unfortunately, people don't tell the whole story.
Right.
Especially if you haven't had to deal with death directly and have to do that preparation. But this is just amazing information. So is it uncommon for people to come to a funeral home and do a tour to decide? Like, do they come and ask questions? Would you suggest people do that?
Yes. It's kind of like buying a house. You know, you get with a realtor, and the realtor is giving you the options of what they can do for you, you know, where they can show you. But at the same time, you're able to feel that vibe from that realtor.
Yeah.
You know? And are they really a genuine person? Are they really here for my interest, not just a commission? So therefore, going to a local funeral home and choosing your local funeral director is just the same concept. You want to make sure that you have that connection.
Yeah.
You know, they're just not here to take my money out of my policy.
Right.
They're just not here to say they got a deceased in their care, but they're really here for my well-being, to simply say, I'm willing to take care of you when you pass. I'm going to take care of your mother when you pass. And then, of course, you know, you go in, pick out everything that you want to do, because that's considered pre-arrangement.
Yeah.
You know, pre-arrangement is on the rise. I encourage families to do pre-arrangement. That way, nobody has to decipher what you want if something should happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, that's the biggest problem now, especially in the African American community, to where nobody knows when mama dies. Well, you think she want to wear purple? You think she want to wear blue? Does she want a pantsuit on? Does she want a dress on? Does she want to go to the church cemetery? Does she want to go in the mausoleum? Does she want the service at the church? Does she want it at the house? We are doing a lot of home services now in the yard. So since the pandemic, that has opened up another whole bracket of services where we do them at the home.
Is that allowed?
Yes.
Especially if you're in a residential area?
You can do it.
Wow.
You know what, back in the day, back in the 30s and 40s, they always took the body back home for viewing before the funeral.
I know they do that in certain countries, but I have never heard of them doing that. Now we got my dog buried in the backyard, but I didn't know that you can put bodies back there too.
Yes. Yeah, you have to have an acre, like in Richland County in Columbia, South Carolina, you have to have an acre reserved on your own property to bury somebody on there. And you have to have a fence, and it has to have a gate.
Okay.
So legally you can do it, but a lot of people are taking the remains home for viewing. And so like the day before the funeral, they would do a traditional wake hour at the funeral home. They'll do it at the home now.
Wow. So what advice would you give someone who is interested in going into the funeral business? And do you think there's a certain personality type that does well in the business?
Going into funeral business, you have to love people. You come with all shapes, forms, and fashion.
Dead and alive, right?
Dead and alive. Dead and alive. You have to love people. You have to have a love for science.
Okay.
You have to have a love for the ooey and gooey stuff, because it does get ooey and gooey. You have to have a creative mind. You know, families, I tell my staff all the time in training sessions, we don't operate cookie cutter funerals because I don't want you to feel like that. Well, my mama's funeral was just like so-and-so funeral. No, your mama's funeral is her own individual funeral.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have to be very creative in that mindset. You have to be willing to put in long hours. You know, there are a lot of sleepless nights that I have just making sure that Miss Sue's funeral is going to be right the next day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm checking everything off to make sure this is what the family requested, this is already done. You know, any last minute decisions. Like I said, people can get married 4 or 5 times. They can get divorced 4 or 5 times. But when it comes to funerals, you only get one funeral.
That's it.
One funeral.
Just one.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Cousin, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Y'all clap it up for Des Corley.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you came.